Ah, yes, disturbing media. The topic of anything and everything disturbing is an algorithmic goldmine, be it movies, videos, websites, or true crime cases. If you have something twisted and macabre to offer, an eager audience is ready to eat it out of the palms of your hands. And in my neck of the woods, this rings true as well. Although the idea of dark and disturbing music is, well, it's filled with the brim with low-effort content by creators grifting at low expectations and overly curious clickbait enjoyers, showing off frivolous noise projects only disturbing to those unfamiliar with the genre, relying heavily on the flair and flash of the art and whatever meaning is meant to be derived from the static-soaked TV buzzing we're listening to. Or maybe you'll even see a showcase of records and artists whose music is only really unnerving due to the context surrounding that person, rather than the actual music or lyrics contained within. And look, I enjoy slop content and hearing wild stories of artists like Mayhem and their antics, and learning about outlandish and beautiful genres of music like scat grind. But at the end of the day, it's all just popcorn entertainment. So what is there to talk about when an album or a song itself is unnerving or disturbing based on the content that it actually carries? Music that is written to mess with your head and leave you feeling a bit off or haunted, or even reveling in the guilt that comes with enjoying it. Well, that's what we're here to talk about today. Whether it's due to the surreal and odd nature of the music itself, lyrics written to speak on horrifying realities over fun and fast-paced music, or even simulations of mental disorders that could come for just about any of us one day, there's a lot to dig into when you ditch the shock and awe of the disturbing descriptor and embrace something like unnerving. And it's easy to see how a simple descriptor change can heavily affect the way we look at things. The reason I'm focusing so heavily on that is due to the fact that when we solely focus on what is considered quote-unquote disturbing, it quickly invalidates the more subtle and surreal. And due to our overly desensitized nature, oftentimes it's only the most extreme that allows us to truly feel disturbed. Hence the majority of those who make content regarding disturbing films always falling into the trap of just disgusting fetish content.
And this entire trilogy is just for people with a vomit fetish.
Or talking about films that are only really disturbing due to their shock factor.
Is the film disturbing? Yes, in the technical sense, but it was more cringy for me at the end of it. And not cringy in the way that social media has transformed the word, but cringy in the fact that it makes you cringe. You make a face, you lean back a bit, you wince your eye.
Or in, sadly, a lot of cases these days, we just end up in the territory of just straight up talking about gore or CSA sort of content and just illegal, disgusting shit. Especially considering when it comes to music, the topic is mainly saturated by evil people and their actions rather than the music that they made. Or it's just discussions of possibly fictitious albums made using cheese pizza, completely eschewing showing off consumable media in favor of jumping straight into the realm of sensationalizing evil and illegal content. So instead, let's take a look at the often overlooked world of unsettling music. The stuff that might not make you sick to your stomach due to how horrifying it is, but rather the kind of thing that more so gets under your skin and messes with your head a bit, allowing you to sink into the abyss. Let's talk about unnerving music to dissociate to. To start off with, I figured we should talk about the more lighthearted sort of stuff. Though, when I say lighthearted, I mostly just mean that the music is easier to listen to, since it's usually the lyrics here that make it twisted. The hook is that the music isn't some shocking sort of extreme metal that from the overly pointed, unreadable logo alone lets you know what you're in for. Because when you listen to a band named Suicide Silence, you're probably not all that surprised when the lyrics reflect the band's title, especially when they sound like this. Rather, subtly unnerving, at least in the way that I'm using the term, refers to artists who will make pop songs and lace them with bitter, cynical, and oftentimes depressing lyrics. And possibly the most famous example of this is the overplayed hit Pumped Up Kicks. Robert's got a quick hand. He'll look around the room, he won't tell you his plan. He's got a rolled cigarette. Hanging out his mouth, he's a cowboy kid. Yeah, he found a 6-shooter gun in his dad's closet with a box full of fun things. I don't even know what, but he's coming for you. Yeah, he's coming for you. Wait. All the other kids with the pumped up kicks, you better run, outrun my gun. As is obvious by the lyrics, and I'm sure by this point everyone is aware of what this song is actually about, it still stands as a fine example of subtly unnerving. It's an infectious indie pop song written to sound like a commercial jingle that gets stuck in your head. This inevitably leads to millions of listeners singing along to a chorus about a spree. And the irony of this whole thing is that, sure, it's violent and nasty, and while being some radio fluff, but it's something that allows the twisted nature of the lyrics to sink in even deeper than something else, since most listeners wouldn't instantly catch what the song's about, only to be hit with a wave of guilt once it does, smacking you like a sack of bricks with the twisted meaning that they hold. It recontextualizes the entire thing, taking a seemingly frivolous bit of pop music and turning it on its head. A far cry from the blood-soaked lyrics we expect from extreme music, but it hits harder due to the fact that they are removed from the medium that we would expect them in. This can be applied to more than just hipster music, however, as even older bands and artists would partake in this pretty frequently. While we can go back to even Johnny Cash with Ring of Fire, since gonorrhea is a bit of a scary prospect, on a more serious note, Cash is actually a big name to throw in this ring, because quite a few of his songs tell tales that might come across as your average golden age country sort of thing, but every now and again he would throw out a song like The Devil's Right Hand. The Devil's Right Hand is a simple little tune where Johnny sings over an upbeat guitar about his love for pistols and anger issues. An even better example of this, though, that really cuts to the chase would actually be from The Cure. Specifically, the song Doing the Unstuck. Doing the Unstuck is one of The Cure's poppiest songs off Wish, the very same album that Friday I'm in Love comes from. And to the untrained ear, you might hear this catchy tune and think it's another one of Robert's lovesick anthems. But as any Cure fan knows, the music isn't always what it seems. Kick out the gloom, kick out the blues, tear out the pages with all the bad news, pull down the mirrors and pull down the walls, tear up the stairs and tear up the floors. Oh, just burn down the house, burn down the street, turn everything red, the beat is complete. With the sound of your world going up in the fire, it's a perfect day to throw back your head and kiss it all goodbye. Whether the song is a metaphor for burning your life to the ground and giving up, or a literal track about just burning down your house after you hit rock bottom and blowing your head off in a chair, either one stands as a grim and disturbing musing to throw over one of The Cure's poppiest and most upbeat songs. But hey, we spent most of this section almost solely talking about pop music. So, is this a phenomenon that can only exist within non-heavy forms of music? Well, absolutely not. And the best example of this is the underground legend Machine Girl. The brainchild of Matt Stephenson, Machine Girl is a multifaceted project composed of his solo works of electronic music that covers a lot of ground as it is. The project is also a duo who produces vocal-led albums taking a modern stab at the digital hardcore sound of the late 90s and early 2000s, such the likes of Atari Teenage Riot, or more accurately, Dissociate. So, what happens when you take the fast-paced, intense music with a fun and adrenaline-fueled spirit and lace it with something a bit more disturbing? You get Fuck Your Guns. Fuck Your Guns. Lesson number 1. Don't be such a male, man. Going postal sucks. Fuck your guns. Lesson number 3. Learn some fucking empathy and play with your own squishy. This song is about spiritualers. More specifically, our involuntarily celibate friends who turn into virgins with rage. Cleverly using the term going postal, which became a way to describe that crime during a wave of attacks at postal offices, playing up the sexual frustration that tends to be a major player in these sorts of crimes with the learn empathy and play with your own squishy line. What pushes this further is the song's verses that go into describing the twisted mindset that some of these people have. See you in hell, I shit where I eat. Chivalry's alive in my echo chamber. Pray to God things go my way, or taste my temper tantrum bullet spray. You have a choice, I'm a reasonable man. Russian roulette unless my dick's in your hand. See you in hell, I will punish you all for the self-inflicted hell I made. These metal slugs are the tears I won't cry. I'm a hero to my own fucking kind. These twisted lyrics paired with the infectiously fun music make it all the more surreal and disturbing. Taking a serious issue and not really playing it up for laughs or making light of it, especially when we look at the manifestos or interviews regarding certain people YouTube doesn't like us talking about. Another track that does this expertly, but in a more political fashion, is Psycho Signal Jammer. Eyes in the trees looking for me. I hide my footsteps in the breeze. Sync up my feet, Doppler effectively. Stealth achieved until the return of the frequency. I pick up speed, a skip to my step. Cicadas buzzing in my head. I pick up speed, a skip to my step. Cicadas screaming in my head. Psycho Signal Jammer, LRAD. A lonely bird song resonates inside of me. The lyrics take you into the perspective of a protester caught in a riot, succumbing to psychosis and paranoia as he suffers the horrifying effects of LRAD, or long-range acoustic device, a weapon used to take down a crowd of people by blaring ear-piercing noise, reminiscent to that of a cicada, the effects of which can lead to not just loss of hearing, but even permanent deafness. A pretty serious and gnarly thing to really talk about on a song that sounds like this. It's definitely got some intensity to it, and it's a little bit more heavy than some of the other tracks off the record, but it still has this fun, punkish energy that just gives it this relentlessly enjoyable sound, and that's kind of the hook of this entire record. The main reason I'm throwing it on the list is that it takes serious and outwardly awful scenarios and concepts and packages them up with music that make it all fun, adrenaline pumping, and entertaining, going beyond the packaging of tragedy into pop-laden material of some of Smashing Pumpkins or even The Cure's music, but instead warps scenarios around and turns the experience into a joy, a harsh and punishing joy, but a pleasure nonetheless. And not only with Machine Girl, this can apply to just about all what we've talked about so far, and that's why it stands so high in terms of being unnerving and twisted. There's a level of guilt and morbidity that can be experienced that we don't really get from traditionally heavy forms of music. To, I guess, put this in a more blatant context, think of it like this. When you turn on a horror film like The Grudge, or even something like Evil Dead, you go in expecting to see something dark, violent, and disturbing. I mean, even if you didn't know they were horror, the name alone kind of just lets you in on the type of experience that you're about to have. But let's say you blindly put on a film like Oldboy, that, much like Machine Girl, gives you an idea that you're going to see something with a little bit of bite, violence, and darkness to it, but it holds itself up as a grim yet fun experience with a lot of vibrance, only for its conclusion and meaning to be revealed and recontextualize the entire ride up to that point into something horrific, unnerving you in a way that something that's more open about its contents could never do. The breaking of expectations and taking harsh, depressing, and twisted themes and making them into something fun creates a dissonance unlike anything else, allowing for music's more haunting implications to sink even deeper. Alright, let's ramp up the intensity a bit. I know for a video where I'm trying to discuss things known as being unnerving as more interesting and possibly more twisted than the traditional, oh my god, this is so disturbing clickbait shtick. And while I do think there is far more merit to the subtly unnerving than that, let's play a little bit of hardball and start off with a record that has actually been clickbaited pretty hard in the past. A Sucked Orange by Nurse with Wound. An odd name for an odd album. Though describing this record is a bit of an Olympian feat. It's 55 minutes of bizarre sound collage material that worms its way between being a tedious and frustrating test of your patience eerie ambience, and found sound. It's a mess, and one that's designed to be nothing more than that. I mean, just look at the art. It's surreal and weird and uncomfortable, and that's the best way to describe the music it contains. This is mostly due to the man behind the curtain, Steven Stapleton, being a bit of a madman. If his Kaczynski compound didn't already give it away, Steven is a bit strange and has a deep love of surrealism and Dadaism that he puts into his work, thus giving us offerings like A Sucked Orange, where we get nearly 8 minutes of the phrase Rocket Morton spammed at us. Just to be rewarded with some uncomfortable sound collage material to turn the more nonsensical and frustrating elements and make them feel a lot more cold and uncomfortable. The big thing about this record is that when I just portray it to you the way I have and play some clips out of context and try to give a little bit of nuance to them, it really doesn't get across just how uncomfortable and eerie this entire project is. It really is something you need to sit down and listen to on your own to fully understand. When you just take an annoying sound, or you just take an eerie bit of dark ambience, or as I've said a few times now, the weird sound collage shit that's all over this thing, it's not really going to give you the full experience or even a good preview of it. It's the combinations of all these things that are already kind of weird and off on their own, but even more strange to put together in one 55-minute package that is just a run through the ring of frustration and uncomfortability. But if we want to go a little bit more obscure than Nurse with Wound, but also a little bit more direct, then we can talk about the less tedious to listen to record, Flood Dream by Leia. And much like A Sucked Orange, the art gives away that what we're about to experience is not really a traditional listen. While not using its surreal and strange elements to be obnoxious, and being a far more low-key album with its unnerving elements, it still holds a deep tension as you hear beautiful but off songs like this. Every element sounds slightly out of tune, not to the point of sounding bad, but enough to make your mind wander a bit, sitting in a strange in-between of existential bliss and creeping dread. Many of these songs play into an audio form of the uncanny valley. At times it sounds like a horror film. Other times, it just sounds kind of broken and aimless. As I said, it's much more subtle and low-key. With its beauty, it lulls you into a false sense of security and allows you to relax a bit. But that unrelenting tension and dread from the just slightly off elements and the small bits of surrealism never really let you fully reach that place, almost like a perversion of solitude or a slight loss of safety. The best way I can sum up the record is that it sounds like when you're having a good day and that one anxious thought creeps in your head and infects the rest of your thoughts. Now, the last example of surrealism I really feel like bringing up here might be a bit of a stretch, because it's one that was never actually intended to unease its listeners. Philosophy of the World is an infamous record by the one and only Shags. I know, weird to bring it up, but just trust me here. Imagine it's late at night. You can't sleep, so you decide to go for a walk all alone in the dark. You throw in your headphones and you listen to this.
My pal's name is Football, he always likes to roam. My pal's name is Football, I never find him home. I go to his house, knock at his door.
In a normal setting, this would just sound like poorly written songs performed by people who have never attempted to hold an instrument before. But in the right context, or even for those more sensitive to tension, there's a deeply uncanny nature to the music. Every player is in their own tempo, nothing is in tune, even in the slightest. Odd lyrics that make little to no sense, and the old and dated sound of the recordings just act as the icing on the cake. It feels like you're listening to something that shouldn't exist, like something that's not even real. The uncanny valley isn't something as easily experienced in a musical form, but if there's been anything that's achieved it, it's definitely this. And when you add on the story that these girls were forced into this by their abusive father, who believed that due to a palm reading that he received as a child, that his kids would become musical superstars, and due to this, he walled them off from society, not allowing them to have friends or social lives, it recontextualizes the entire thing to be far more disturbing and twisted than what we would initially write off as just a terribly performed song, transforming from something that is just laughably bad to something far more surreal and macabre. We've been talking about some more abstract aspects to this whole unnerving music thing, so why don't we just get a bit more straightforward and talk about horror-themed music? Now, horror theme music can take many forms, whether it's dark industrial pieces meant to immerse you in tension and terror like the works of Throbbing Gristle, cheesy horrorcore music like ICP, where the music itself is just trying to capture that B-movie charm and its violence and disturbing qualities feel much more campy and tongue-in-cheek. But I think for this video, maybe we should talk about music that's actually built to shock, but with a purpose. Skinny Puppy is one of those bands that is both legendary and obscure, well known to those into industrial music, but more or less just a name that floats around to the greater music world. They were one of the most important pioneers of industrial music during the 80s and 90s, and brought many staples of the genre to life with their fantastic discography. And they also never really sold out during the brief moment when industrial music collided with rock in the mid to late 90s, always keeping their experimental angle and avant-garde qualities when flirting with more traditional songwriting and structure. A plethora of their albums could really be talked about here, as they all kind of have something that they bring to the table that's twisted, disturbing, macabre, or whatever you might want to use to describe it. Even one of their later offerings that came in 2013 with Weapon was directly inspired by the fact that they had invoiced the US government $666,000, all due to the fact that they had discovered that they were using their music to torture people. Although this would end up being fruitless, as the government would just ignore the invoice and deny any usage of Skinny Puppy's music. And while sure, any music can realistically be weaponized if blared at a loud enough volume, Skinny Puppy's dysphoric and haunting soundscapes were more than likely chosen for a very specific reason. Their discography is rich with uncomfortable sound design, twisted lyrics and imagery, and distorted noise, sometimes abstract. Other times contemporary. And that's not even mentioning their horror-themed music videos, or their intense and often gory live shows. Cold War flies forth on wings of self-destruction, an orgy of missile tests, a mortifying flash, huddled, round the radio active, console to control, the lives of the young, levels of toxic waste, disgrace, yet tolerant. A lot of the band's lyrics tend to hold political sentiments to them, from their views on veganism, politics, or in the case of what we just read, the Cold War, using the horror film-esque tension and atmosphere to portray a more direct aura of fear, giving the lyrics an even more powerful edge when attempting to fill the listener with anxiety. And it would prove to be powerful, as the band had built a reputation for their intensity in horror-filled activism. And speaking of horror, when the band really wanted to scare you, they would put out tracks like this. God's Gift Maggot is one of my favorite songs from the band due to its intensity alone. It might sound primitive, but that primitivism aids it in being as brooding and chilling as it is. In the realm of unnerving music, horror-themed stuff typically fails to achieve that sense of dread, ironically or not, and it mostly just sits as a fun theme. But bands like Skinny Puppy really break that mold by making stuff that can genuinely produce some fear in listeners, at least the less cynical and desensitized ones. Another name from a less extreme genre to throw in here would actually be the underground legend Gary Wilson, a brilliant jazz player well known for his experimental music, but using a bit of the surrealism that we talked about before, and some less overt horror themes regarding his imagery and lyrics, it elevates his music into a strange, anxious mess.
But you should have never done that. You should have never thought that I wouldn't find out. But I watched you. I watched you through the trees as I hid up in the woods.
Many of these songs do this where they just sit and drag and fall apart. The vocal performances and odd instrumentation allow for seemingly mild lyrics to have much more grim and dire implications, and letting our heads twist them in a way that Gary couldn't do himself. It uses the abstract to directly play into the listener's own mind and perform the trick for them, leaving us at the mercy of our imaginations. Now, before we move on, I would be remiss not to bring up at least one of metal's many horror-tinged genres. And while the genre is by no means a stranger to serious, twisted, and unsettling lyrical content, the genre that I think is probably one of the most twisted is black metal. And no, not because of the silly, occult, and satanic themes of the genre. Because truth is, that's child's play compared to the darkness we could experience when delving into the subcategory of DSBM, better known as depressive suicidal black metal. There are quite a few names to mention in this genre, and each one varies in their degree of living up to the name. But one of the bands who helped define the genre was a short-lived project called Silencer. While the band and their story deserve a video dive of their own, for our purposes here, the band took the sound and stylings of black metal, which is already entrenched in some horror and occult tropes, and made them into something far more unique. See, a lot of black metal bands already use pagan and satanic and black magic themes as a main basis of their lyrics and aesthetic, where Silencer, on the other hand, took things a bit further, especially their frontman, Natrum, whose lyrics focused on describing pain and suffering. Rip my throat, drink my blood, strangle me, drown me, give me vein and give me pain, knives running through me, O master of wounds, cut me, chase me, waste me, leave me in your arms, cold hands, fingers like razors, break my neck, put out my light, crush my hope, rape my life, cut me, hurt me, cut me, hurt me, take my life, kill me, and kill me. I am what you deserve, death do me submerge. The lyrics invite the listener to join Natrum in his suffering and his death, while other bands have definitely taken things further lyrically, and the album this comes off of itself has some more intense material on it. I think that this one cuts to the chase. Not only did Natrum write of his desire to self-mutilate and self-sunset, but according to those who were there for the recordings, he would self-harm during his recording sessions, and only a short time later, Natrum would abruptly end his time with the project when he was institutionalized at a Swedish mental hospital. The story behind the music has some twisted and disturbing context to it, but what really makes it hit so hard is how it connects with the music itself. This wasn't a band that was just playing up the horror shtick for entertainment or to send a message, but rather an actual confessional of how its vocalist felt, and just what he desired to do to himself, making the horror all the more real and even giving us some existentialism. And you know, maybe now is actually the best time we bring that up. Bringing existentialism into the mix of just about anything will lead to some unnerving elements being laid there, and music is no exception. I talked about this a little bit in my previous video on Silent Hill and its use of liminality. I mentioned that the music had a breathing pattern to it where even its beautiful moments are choked by a severe sense of dread and melancholy. The trip-hop genre in general is kind of full of this, though in most cases it's a bit more subtle. You're not gonna listen to Dummy by Portishead and leave it depressed and broken by any means. However, it does toe the line a bit, and there are existential elements to be found. And Akira Yamaoka's fantastic music pushes this idea a lot further. While I will heavily recommend the Silent Hill OSTs as great music to listen to if you like to experience this emotion in musical form, I'd rather focus on stuff here that's a bit more direct. DSBM, as I mentioned in the previous section, fuses the horror and existential elements in an interesting way as well. But if I had to really cut it down to the wire here, I think only a handful of things can really hit the nail on the head. Ambient music is a genre that can do a lot to get us there, but one EP that I constantly come back to that encapsulates an existential and ethereal void better than anything is Reclamation by May She Smile. May She Smile is an artist most well known for their transgressive and experimental takes on electronic music, spanning across multiple genres, as well as surprising the world in 2021 by releasing the best industrial record of that year. Though, much like that surprise, back in 2016, they surprised fans with Reclamation, a beautiful ambient noise EP, fusing many other sounds from different genres together to create this beautiful yet gut-wrenchingly somber experience. It might not be the most intense noise music out there, or the most breathtakingly ambient thing for that matter, but what it is a one-of-a-kind piece that translates pain and beauty better than anything else I've ever really listened to. But that being said, if we're talking about music that evokes existentialism, one that is even more pressing and even more unnerving would be a project that I'm sure by now you've either seen coverage or at least the memes regarding. Leland James Kirby has been a bit of an underground legend since the late 90s, playing along with a few different genres, but the one that we're here to talk about goes under the name Plunderphonics, and Kirby's main take on the sound is collecting old forgotten songs off vinyls from a bygone era, in this case jazz and big band songs, recording these tracks through echoes and reverbs, slightly distorting the audio in pieces to give it an even older and more nostalgic feel. The whole thing sounds like a forgotten relic from another world. It lulls you into a strange sense of comfort while also feeling a bit alien or even ghostly. This theme plays into much of the Caretaker's music, but what separates Everywhere at the End of Time from his other work is with its intent. It uses the nostalgic yet haunting sound the Caretaker is known for to demonstrate and simulate the stages of Alzheimer's. And while that might not sound too bad for those who haven't fully pondered what that could be, well, think of it like this. Imagine that after a certain point, you begin to lose focus. Your mind begins to drift. Things seem relatively normal, but your memory is a bit foggier than it was before. You think nothing of it, but as the years go on, you lose more and more of your memories. Your brain is beginning to work slower, and you're not even really realizing that this is happening. Your loved ones come to see you, but you don't even really recognize them or know who they are. The world begins to close in on you as you have an even harder time recollecting your own life. And as it gets worse, your own name, you begin to neglect your health, your responsibilities, those that rely on you, until ultimately your mind becomes all but blank, no longer holding memories more than a brief amount of time, until ultimately you feel nothing, just apathetic, a husk of your former self. Your independence is taken from you, as you can't even do the basic self-care anymore. Your mind just won't allow you to remember or think hard enough to keep the necessary routine, ultimately being left in a prison of your mind, covered and choked in the ivy of dementia. While there's far more that goes into dementia and Alzheimer's, this is just a basic way of understanding what it does to you. The most horrifying part of it all is simply that we don't really have the best understanding of what actually causes it. And Alzheimer's isn't just a disease that strikes you down quickly. It's a slow and gradual process that, when it begins, is easily written off as just aging or dealing with stress, only for it to slowly ramp in its effects and intensity until our minds completely fade away. So just how does an album tackle such a monstrous and intense condition? Everywhere at the End of Time isn't just an album. It's a repetition, 6.5-hour experience. Each stage shifts and changes, with parts 1 and 2 holding that nostalgic and blissful tone of Kirby's previous work. Only for those songs and samples to warp as it goes on, subtle at first. But come stage 3, it really begins to show that things aren't getting any better. The dark descent really starts to set in, and this is even apparent in the album's artwork. Each stage has its own painting paired with it, and each one becomes more warped and distorted just like the music, which feels as if their meanings are being forgotten and distorted as we fall further down the spiral. When we reach stages 5 and 6, those once blissful and nostalgic songs that only had a hint of unease to them are now distorted and harsh, reaching past the threshold of haunting and directly into terrifying. It is both beautiful and dark how Everywhere at the End of Time takes us on a journey many of us had the misfortune of watching our loved ones go through, blessing us with a deeper and more tangible understanding of just what they went through, and allowing us to better appreciate the time we spent with them, and if we're lucky, the time we have left. Though, the disturbing element here is, after you've wiped your tears and sat with the emotions this record put you through, you can realize that one day, this might be your journey, as your mind spirals and descends down the same hole of dementia. To end this video, I thought I would leave you with an obscure and under-talked about record that really encapsulates a lot of what we've talked about today. It doesn't quite hit every note, but it's an album that feels like it doesn't exist. It sounds uncanny, like the music you would hear a character listen to in an old movie. It's an album that conveys horror, disturbing and strange things, but deceptively and divorced from a medium we would ever expect to hear it in. What if I told you there was an entire record about a prosperity preacher who discovers conjoined twins with magical healing powers, and uses his slimy business skills to pimp them out for profit before succumbing to his own lustful desires for them, ending in just about the only way one could expect? That sounds like a ridiculous fever dream and an uncomfortable listen, doesn't it? Well, it's not just some obscure record or a gag I pulled out of my ass, and rather, it's one of the most acclaimed albums by one of the most important and influential underground music groups to ever exist. And that album is God in Three Persons, by the residents. The residents are a bit of a rabbit hole, and honestly I could have chosen a few of their releases to showcase in this video, because just about everything they touch has a creepy and otherworldly feel to it. That's not to say the band is based around horror, but more so that they exist in the avant-garde and surreal realm, purposely sitting in the obscure shadows as a cult-followed icon. God in Three Persons is a rock opera, whose story is mostly told through spoken word, all done in the Torchaic octameter, an old poetic meter where every line having one stressed syllable followed by an unstressed syllable. To make this a bit understandable for non-literature nerds here, it's the same format that Edgar Allan Poe used to write The Raven, and much like the works of Poe, the deceptively cheesy music leaves the lyrics to do the dirty work of getting under your skin. Stand aside, I told the masses, and with that I made my passage. From the lonely to the only side, openly they smiled to greet me, like they always knew they'd meet me. Somewhere walking up and down the road, I knew I must appear as someone, far beyond the common come on. So I could not say my name was Ed, so I said, I'm Mr. X, who wants to come and who expects to help to guide your efforts to succeed. They laughed a little bit at me, and then said, Mr. X indeed, and hugged me somehow hard and tenderly. Even from the word go, the greasy prosperity preacher shows he's willing to use his beliefs to justify the exploitation of those he sees money in, alluding to fate when he meets them and sees just what he can use them for. And while an album about the predatory exploitation of children would already be a good enough reason to include God in Three Persons on this list, the story is much darker than that. On one day it finally happened, just before they took a nap. We joked around the room in which they slept. They were kidding me about an incident when I kicked out some rowdy shouting something near the door. They said that I had looked afraid, and if I didn't act my age, well then they would have held me back next time. I laughed and said it would make more than just two freaks to make me stop if someone interrupted us again. The actual story it tells is about Mr. X, a character inspired by Elvis Presley's manager, Tom Parker. He begins his journey by exploiting these conjoined twins with healing powers to boost his influence and prosperity preaching. But as the story unfolds, he begins to lust after them, the twins being a male and female stuck together, and his desire for the female growing more and more as the story goes on. It only gets more complicated as he discovers that their sexes are fluid. As temptation calls, Mr. X lets his urges take over. He comes to terms with the fact that the twins are far more cunning than they initially let on, and he has far less control than he thinks. Believing they might actually be controlling him, he resolves to commit a violent act and sever the connection between the twins by splitting them. Only in the album's conclusion, realizing that his lust did not come from any supernatural force, but rather his own accord. Take your clothes off, I commanded, like a bold and common bandit, basking in a feeling of control. I was standing back behind them, with a length of line to tie them. Once their nakedness had been revealed, kneel, I said, becoming heated, for the task had been completed, and I felt my goal was drawing near. It's easy to write this thing off because the whole thing sounds like this.
I told the masses, and with that I made my passage from the lonely to the only side. Openly they smiled to greet me like they always knew they'd.
Just really cheesy, and the over-the-top narration can cause a lot of listeners to just bow out. But it also serves to lull those who persevere into a false sense of safety, making its more uncomfortable elements hit harder, and the dark story we watch unfold all the more disturbing. Yes, I'm alone but not forgotten, for each comes and sees me often. Sitting on a seat beside my bed, we laugh and reminisce about the life that once was bliss, before an act of passion made us part. Of course they'll always be together, but their bond is made of leather, not the flesh and blood it used to be. God in Three Persons is one of the few records to genuinely get under my skin from its lyrical content alone. There are definitely far more visceral and disgusting pieces of music out there, especially in the metal world, but for some reason this album is just haunting and uncomfortable, in a way that feels absolutely uncanny, as if I'm hearing something I really shouldn't, though that's kind of the beauty of it. The whole entire beauty of this whole unnerving music iceberg thing. I'm barely even scratching the surface. There's far more to dig into than what I talked about here, and if anything, you should consider this more of an intro. I hope to have at least inspired a few of you to start digging through the trenches of this whole style, or whatever you want to call it. Unnerving music is one of the most fun and interesting things to dig your teeth into. There's a lot to uncover. There's a lot of variety in the way it can take forms and shapes. The type of scares or haunts or whatever you want to call it, the experience. You can have something cheesy and lighthearted, something really twisted and dark, something directly on the nose letting you know what it is, or something incredibly subversive. There's something out there for everybody. And look, judging by how popular horror is online, I know most of you would love to dig into this. But with that being said, subscribe, support me on Patreon, follow me on Twitter. I'll see you in the next video.